Thank you very much for joining me, panel. I really do appreciate that. Certainly looking chipper, up to the task, and ready to share with us some wonderful, wonderful information. So let me just start here. I said I'm going to frame this conversation. It's about rhino poaching and all the rest. There's this thing called the conservationist dilemma. Francois, what is this conservationist dilemma? What is the problem that we're actually trying to solve here with rhinos? What is this thing?
Good morning, everybody. Mariana and MTN, thank you very much for inviting me. So I'm going to frame my reply to you in the context of an IT problem, an end user that has a problem that needs to be solved. My first career was in the IT industry, so here you go. Up until about 10 years ago, we in the conservation industry thought that conservation is about managing wildlife, the flora and the fauna. Put a fence around a place to keep people out and to keep animals in, and then you manage the stuff inside there. And many people irresponsibly thought that really just meant let nature take its course, which is a silly idea, but a different subject. Today, military jargon like combat readiness, rapid deployment tactics, counterintelligence are part of our jargon. In the old days, 10 years ago, security was an unimportant part of our business. It existed, took a small part of our budget. It was certainly not mission critical, and usually we outsourced it. Today, security is absolutely mission critical to us, and it costs an enormous part of a disproportionate part of our budget. So what changed over these years? What changed is the rapid increase in demand for animal parts, animal body parts, for all sorts of remedies, all over the world, but in particular in some Asian countries. So many conservationists and commenters feel we should not talk so much about this problem because somehow we can make it worse. Now, I have respect for that opinion, and I think we should not say things that might exacerbate the problem, but you also can't stick your head in the sand and assume the problem will go away. It's not going away, it's getting worse. And I'm sure if you listen to me talking about this militarization of the situation where basically the poachers have bigger armies and bigger guns, and then we have bigger armies and bigger guns, and so it goes. Many of you may say, but that seems irrational. You are dealing with the symptom. You should go do something about the cause. So let me quickly comment on three elements of the cause. Firstly, there are the end users of animal body parts. And you hear me talk about animal body parts in general, because although our and everybody's laser focus today is on rhinos, because their body part is by far the most valuable, but there are other animals that are subject to poaching, and some of them are dwindling, in particular, for example, lions, whose body parts are also used for medicinal remedies, and pangolins, whose scales are used for the same, and elephants, whose tusks are used for artifacts and jewelry. All of them are being poached today, and all of them are problems, some even more serious than the rhino plight. Anyway, you'd say, why don't you guys do something, as I say, about the cause? So some of these body parts have been used as I said, all over the world, but in particular in some Asian countries for centuries, in some cases up to 2,000 years, for up to 2,000 years. But why did it suddenly increase so dramatically? There are a lot of speculation about that. But the most realistic cause that I've heard is that the economic upliftment and the economic miracles that occurred in some of those Asian countries put a lot more people in a position where they could afford, where they had disposable cash and they could afford luxury items like very expensive animal body part remedies. The general understanding of this problem and treating that cause is that it's very unlikely we'll in less than, say, a generation, 25 years, be able to do something about that problem. In other words, change the behavior of those end users. Second element of the cause is the middlemen, the crime syndicates who employ people to go and poach animals and who somehow managed to get them to the target market. So these are not new people that came about in the last 10 years when there was a surge in demand. These are exactly the same crime syndicates. I'd be very surprised if there's not a representative of them sitting here today, who have had great intelligence, highly specialized. They've been doing narcotics trafficking for the last 60 years. They've been doing human trafficking for as long. And the best law enforcement people in the world with virtually unlimited budgets, they have not been able to stop that. So good luck if we think that's the place where we can stop the flow of poached animals. And then finally, there are the poor guys. Now, I'll say just now why I say that, who are the actual poachers. They are the face of poaching. We see pictures in newspapers and magazines of captured poachers or even killed poachers, and we think those are the bad guys. Now, these are typically people that are poor, typically from neighboring countries. They have no economic prospects to feed their families, to improve their lot, little or no chance of improving their lot. And a rhino horn weighs between 1.5 and 4.5 kilos, depending on the subspecies, the sex, and the age. And rhino horn is now on a par or more expensive than the most expensive commodities like gold and platinum. So you can imagine one 4.5 kilo horn can dramatically change such a person's life. And I wonder how many of us, if we were put in the same situation, would not respond the same way. Take a chance. It's a life-threatening chance. The chances of being caught is not as high as we may think it is, which is something you're going to hear more about today, where we wouldn't take the same choice. So actually, out of the whole sequence of the cause that I've spoken about, the only people behaving rationally are the actual soldiers who go and do the poaching. They have a rational reason for what they're doing. That other stuff has been proved not to have any medical or other improvement or value. And the middlemen are just greedy criminals.
Yeah.
So those are the only guys who actually have a reasonable reason to do what they do. So we are many, many, many years away from dealing with the cause, and we're stuck with dealing with the symptom. So as a game reserve, we said to ourselves, we're not sure if we and the industry can sustain the cost in lives and in money of this war indefinitely. They get money every time they get a rhino horn. They can fund their war. We don't. We get no extra money if we save one of our rhinos. He just wanders around and keep eating our grass. So we're not sure if we can sustain it. And we said to ourselves, we need to completely think out of the box about this and find a way that has a much, much higher probability of poachers being caught so that they will just stop doing it. And in thinking about that and starting to talk to people about solutions, it became very evident, and everybody says, but you must track your rhinos. And we started saying, yeah, okay, but why would we do that? Well, you can find out what its heartbeat is, if it's going up or down, the body temperature. You can find out when the heart stops. You can even hear a gunshot nearby, and you'll know exactly where it is on the GPS. And we said, yeah, okay. And then all of those signs are signs of, hey, it's too late. The heart rate's going up because it's stressed. Maybe it's going to be killed. The gunshot's gone off. That's too late. So we said, and now you put in location of our rhinos on a GPS. Do we really want it? Do we really want ourselves, all of us, to know exactly where they are? And then somebody can just hack in our system and they'll know exactly where they are. I said, well, we don't think that's a solution. We have to find another way of preventing this. And I think that's what I must in my reply.
No, Francois,
that's the problem in a nutshell.
And just and I mean, we'll probably get more data about this, but I mean, over the last decade, there's been over 7,000 rhino that have been poached across Africa, and I think in 2016 the numbers were 1,050 or 1,054. Mariana, from your perspective as well as from MTN, what exactly is the solution? So Francois alluded to this, and you said explicitly it's not about tracking the rhino. If you're not tracking the rhino, what are you doing? What exactly is the solution that you've come up with?
I think if we have a look at the solution, I mean, I was one of those people with a preconceived idea that thought, well, we need to take the rhino. It's going to be so much easy. And the first discussion I had with Francois and Prof. Herbert was, okay, we've got a solution for you, and it includes tagging the rhino. So we had to come up with a very different way of doing it. And We still have a look at the IoT stack. So we have a look at the sensor layer, and in the sensor layer, we actually went ahead and we produced a customized sensor that actually took into consideration the location, the GPS location, but also having a look at the accelerators and which direction it's moving in a 3D format, and then having a look at the temperature. The key idea was not to tag the rhino, but rather tag the animals around the rhino. It's a well-known fact that animals are absolutely superb sensors, and any of us that spend time in the bush actually would comment about it on a regular basis. So we actually went ahead and we tagged the rhino. We didn't tag the rhinos, we tagged impala, blue wildebeest, zebra, and eland.
But it's interesting, right? So you mentioned right now, so it's not about the rhinos, but it's about everything else. And that reminds me of something that I read, please to Mariana, where music actually isn't the note itself, but it's the white spaces between the notes that makes music. I'm assuming that's another way of looking at it, right?
I think that's a good way of thinking about it. Sometimes, if we come up, if the normal methods of solving a problem doesn't work, we need to look at it differently. And I think in many cases, this is what we're doing in the IT world today. So on the sensor layer, we actually tag the animals. If we have a look at the connectivity and the transporting of the data, we actually connected that to a LoRa gateway. Welgevonden is 37,000 hectares of beautiful reserve up north, and there's not a lot of GSM coverage. So we could not use GSM, NB-IoT, or any of those for a solution. So we actually had a look at LoRa, and then we made sure that we had very good encryption in there as well, because that was a key requirement from the reserve to make sure that this is impregnable. This then came back to through the MTN network into our cloud environment, okay? And you know, earlier on I said, well, it's simplistically we look at 4 layers. When you implement these things, it's never simplistic. If we have a look at the challenges that we had to actually tag the animals, it's not just a Fitbit that I can quickly change or recharge. I needed to make sure that the battery life was going to be long enough. We needed to make sure we don't want to dart the animals on a regular basis. So how can we make sure we get this in the best possible way attached to the animal, and that you only dart them when we really need to do so? So there's very different considerations you need to take into when you have a look at a project like this. We did a lot of planning up front. We had numerous meetings where we actually planned how we were going to do these things, and needless to say, the unexpected happened. We actually, when we have a look at the integration on the computing layer at Gartner, we shared a lot that we did to get all of that done prior to Welgevonden and Wageningen University looking at the data. We represented that with Prodap in the application layer, and IBM helped us with different products to actually make that data available to Wageningen. But today we're not going to spend any time on those last 2 components per se. We're really going to focus on all the work that was done by Wageningen University and what they've actually found from all this data that they've collected. But I would just like to show some pictures now that we've got this. There you can actually see a blue wildebeest with a collar, which was specifically custom made, and the sensor to it. And then also next to it, that photo is actually the tower for a LoRa gateway. Now, these gateways we erected in the middle of nowhere. We tried to put them on roads and areas that were easily accessible, but needless to get the coverage that we needed, we actually had to go to some tough and tight spots as well. The team, actually, the networking team did a superb job. This was just after the Knysna fires, and they wanted to make sure that we had a lot of robustness in the towers. There you can see a representation of the LoRa network in the Welgevonden breeding camp. And you can see the different coverage that we've got from the different towers. One of the challenges that we did not expect was that typically you can get a nice long range from LoRa. Unfortunately, because of the topology in the Welgevonden environment, it's very hilly and all of that. So there were other things we had to take into consideration. But that's just a visual representation of the LoRa network in the breeding camp that where we ran the project.
Okay, wonderful. Prof, from all the way from the university overseas, what was your role? What's the role that you guys have here at Wageningen University?
No, the first thing you have to do at the university is to think. And so when you're talking about the Internet of Things, it is also about the Internet of Thinking, I think. And so, and the second thing is to realize that, like what Francois said, we did not want to track the rhinos, because the rhinos are too vulnerable and too easy to kill, and that is the thing you don't want. And so we were thinking very much about human history, and perhaps you then suddenly realize that we as mankind have been living, for example, with dogs, guardian dogs. You know, guard dogs have been with us for approximately 40,000 years. But it took us, and it took the dog, you know, the wolf, it took them to evolve into a system of a sensor, being the dog, listening to the enemy or to a poacher or whatever, and mankind understanding what the dog was saying to it. It took approximately 40,000 years. Now you saw that beautiful graph that you showed yourself of the explosive activity that is developing. And so we thought, well, we cannot deploy dogs, of course, in the reserve, because the dogs are going to kill the wildlife. You have to feed the dogs, that is too expensive. And then suddenly we thought, here you see these wild animals. These wild animals have evolved over hundreds of thousands of years to be aware where their enemy is sitting. So there's a lion, a leopard, but also a poacher. Now, the intriguing thing of the Internet of Things and artificial intelligence and everything that we're doing at this moment is that evolution between the wolf and the man that took 40,000 years, we tried to do in a couple of months. So we tried to understand, what is that wildebeest telling us? What is that impala telling us? That is what basically was the breakthrough in our thinking, because we do know that rangers, all of us, our senses are not very good in that bush. And we are easily fooled. These animals have to survive day and night, and so they must be aware every second in case someone is there to kill them. And so we use these animals, and that is, I think, a real true breakthrough. We use these animals as sensors for us to tell us what is going on there in the veld.
So I mean, that's amazing. And just to emphasize the one point that you made, it's not just a simple IoT, we're going to put a tag on a machine or an animal and see what happens. It's also fundamentally about understanding their behavior and how do they think and how they behave. I mean, what's been the results been? I mean, surely there's a few questions here. The first is, I mean, what's the results? And secondly, more importantly, how do you scale this? Because surely this is a novel method. This is something that hasn't been done before. But what are the results and how do you scale?
The first thing you have to realize is that if you're asking yourself about, you're lying in your bed and a fire sensor is going off. Now, you hear these bleeps, and you heard these bleeps a couple of minutes ago, you're not reacting to that. So the big question the whole time is when a sensor is picking up something, it must be picking up something that is different from normal. And so the first thing we have to do is understand what is normal behavior of these wildebeest, these zebra and these impala. And here you see a little bit of the amount of data that we got through the MTN network into Wageningen. It is not big data, but it's a lot of data. And so what we were establishing there, first of all, what is normal that these animals are doing if there is no poacher around, if there is not an intrusion.
So the baseline.
The baseline. The second thing, if I can get the next slide, please. The second thing is that we have to start understanding what these animals are telling us. And so we send many, many students into the field where we are doing experiments with the animals grazing, walking around happily, then rangers and other personnel of Welgevonden going into the field. We were monitoring what the rangers were doing, so we knew exactly what they were doing. We were monitoring the animals, and here the students then were looking at exactly at which distance, for example, when personnel is coming in, is the animal reacting, and how is that animal reacting. So that was a very first important step. Every type of behavior had to be annotated.
Interesting, interesting. Okay, well, so the question around scale, I'll ask now. But audience, just to let you know, I want to open this up to take a few questions from the audience shortly. So have those questions prompted. We've got some roaming mics we'll take across. Maybe, Prof, either yourself or Francois, I want to find out a little bit more about these animals that are the early detector sentinels. I think sentinels is what we term them, right? So like in Johannesburg, for your purposes, the hardy-dars, great sentinels and alarm clocks that make a hell of a lot of noise. But as we scale this project across South Africa and across Africa, those sentinel animals will certainly change. I mean, what other animals can we use? How do we think about this in the context of scale, and perhaps also talking about some of the results?
If you think about working in a much drier environment, like say Namibia or so, then you immediately start thinking about gemsbok. In many other places of the world, we have not tried it yet. You could think about giraffe. Giraffe are having that very high elevated position. They can look much better into the bushes than any other animal, but their behavior is very different from the behavior of impala. So again, you have then to start learning what is a giraffe telling us in contrast to an impala. You can think about in areas where elephants are not poached to use elephants. So I think theoretically any animal can be used. A wild dog can be used, a buffalo can be used. They tell us, all of them tell us a different story about what is going on there in the bush.
Okay, and so for me, I'm just trying to work out over here. So we've got this incredible project. What have some of the results been? Help me understand, where have we gone with this? What are some of the results we've gotten as a result of this incredible thinking outside the box, tagging the other animals, not the rhino itself?
Yeah. The most important thing is that we then learned through algorithm development, we started learning what is abnormal behavior and what is normal behavior. So you have all these animals walking around, they're all happily grazing, they're all looking at each other, they have a great day because there are no lions in this breeding camp, and suddenly something is wrong. Now, we do know, because we put a sensor around the students or we put a sensor around the personnel, so we knew what it was. But the animals tell us. And here you see a picture, for example, this is the breeding camp of Welgevonden. We are sensing all these animals, and then suddenly the algorithm tells us, in this case, 3 animals are behaving abnormally. And that is triggering the situation. And then if you are doing a standard type of triangulation, you can tell that is where the personnel is doing a strange experiment. And so that is the real breakthrough. You have to understand normal behavior, and then you understand abnormal behavior, and that you can sense automatically, and that is then telling you that is where the intrusion is taking place.
Cool, spectacular. So let me ask this question, Francois, and this is specifically to you. Traditionally, game reserves and parks have been this very low-tech, no-tech solution, right? Suddenly we're moving into, let's call it the IoA, the Internet of Animals. What does it mean for you specifically? And is this a model for other parks, for other reserves? How do we play around that?
That is a good question, and it's a sad situation, because in the classic management of wildlife, the use of technology has not been on the forefront. In fact, even down to the using technology in the day-to-day administration of wildlife environments is not a big deal. So we have a lot of highly competent wildlife conservation kind of staff who aren't exposed to technology even as much as us living in the city, because cell phones don't work everywhere, so they don't even carry a cell phone necessarily all the time. So we're in the fortunate position that we spent many years computerizing, if you like, our business, and our people are used to using technology, and I think these people chose us as the target for this, developing this because of that, because they saw in us the capability to to pick up the loose when it comes to technology. But out of the 6,000 or so parks in Africa, there are maybe 60 that would have the capability to either develop or deploy something like this. But we're hoping to have a system that we can productize and do it in such a way that with some help from us and others, it can be deployed even to areas where there's not a high-tech knowledge.
So it really is pushing the...
We have a central control room where all this stuff comes to, and that's really the place where you're going to need the technology expertise.
So we've got the brains over here, we've got the prototype, how do we scale this across? And it's really about changing behavior. Mariana, exciting announcement. What's this exciting announcement you've been baiting us with?
So, today, the chances of a poacher to be detected is 3% in South Africa. And we are changing the odds with this solution to 86.4% within a 125-meter radius. So that is a phenomenal difference.
That's incredible. That's absolutely, and that's the results. Absolutely incredible.
And Prof. Herbert is quite confident that if we can actually install more and get more sentinels out there, we can improve that 125 meters to 50 meters. Now, anybody who's been on a reserve know that it's like looking for a needle in the haystack. And I think this can make a real difference in rhino poaching in future.
Spectacular. Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Panel, from my side, have you got any closing thoughts? Prof, perhaps from your side, Francois? Yeah.
You know, a very important thing is that you were talking about these drones. And I think drones are wonderful solutions to problems that we are facing in having eyes in the bush. What we're trying to achieve here is that with this pinpointing where something is wrong, then we can send, like Francois said, a drone there to send you the pictures to the control room. Now, why am I personally so interested in this whole situation? If a ranger is in the bush and he does not know where the danger sits to his own life, so it's not only about the lives of rhinos, it is also the lives of the people that are protecting our heritage. And it's very easy to sit here in a room and talk about heritage and protecting and all these sort of things. But there are men and women going into that bush day and night, literally also at night, when all of you would be mortally afraid, except for that one person who is perhaps that criminal that Francois was reporting to, but all of us would be mortally afraid in walking into a booby-trapped situation, as it were, where the enemy is sitting prepared to take you out instead of taking a rhino out. And we think that if the rangers are equipped with this type of information, where they do know this is really where we have to be ultimately aware, we think that it's creating a safer situation for the rangers. And you know, I am not in favor of shooting fellow men or women. I think it is also creating a safer situation, strangely enough, for the poacher. Because if the ranger is not being surprised, then he is making an arrest without killing people. And that is what I'm really, as a human being, trying to achieve. So it is not only about saving wildlife, it is also saving fellow people, and especially these rangers that are there every day for protecting your wildlife.
Excellent. Mariana.
So, last year, 128 game rangers lost their life in the line of duty. Half of those were related to poaching. So, and even in the Kruger Park, they lost their first ranger with a poacher bullet last week, Thursday. Respect Matabula. And we have a look, these guys and girls are putting their lives at risk on a daily basis, trying to save our animals out there.
And it was, in fact, on the 28th of July, World Ranger Day, wasn't it?
Today.
Is it today? It is indeed today. Well, there we go. I don't know what day it is.
International
World
Rangers Day.
Yeah, there we go. So for all the rangers out there. Francois, any closing thoughts from your side?
No, except we're going to need a lot of money. So if anybody has a lot of money, give it to us. We'll roll this out to protect. Our intention with the system, by the way, as a game reserve, is we're not developing something for ourselves only. We're developing something that we can give to anybody that needs it to protect animals. And not only rhinos. All the animals that are exposed to poaching.
So the consummate entrepreneur, where there's an ask, the ask is not just money, the ask is also for resources. Let's find a way to increase this, the penetration of this project, but more importantly to solve the fundamental problem of preserving not just our rhinos and our animals, but also those ranges that are doing amazing things. Panel, thank you very much. Round of applause, please.